What We Pretend We Can't See by Gyzym, Chapter 7. They step out into a forest. Harry gasps a little. He can't help himself. They're standing at the mouth of a glen, looking down onto a long winding creek cutting through it. The walls of the narrow valley are lined with trees, and even in the moonlight, even though it hasn't quite turned spring, there's a suggestion of verdant sketched into every line of the place. Harry can hear bird call, the hoots and cries of wild owls and song thrushes. The air tastes and smells different than it did a moment ago. Fresher. Clean. Harry, a little wildly, looks back around through the portal where he can still see Muggle London in all its mundane glory, painted in grey asphalt and the distant glow of street lamps. He looks back to the glen. It doesn't get any less surreal. Draco laughs, a bright peal into the darkness. Good, isn't it? Good, Harry repeats, dazed, not even really hearing the word. Malfoy, where are we? Draco smiles. When he speaks, he sounds a bit like he does on the tours he gives at the museum. So, there was this mad wizard in the 1660s who was convinced Diagon Alley was going to be the site of some terrible accident. I think a centaur told him or something. I don't remember now. Anyway, he bought up all this land, thinking that when a disaster in question hit, people would want to rebuild somewhere else. And then, incredibly enough, there was a fairly devastating fire in Diagon about 10 years later, but no one wanted to move. It's almost as if, he adds in a pointed little voice, wizards grow attached to their homes and places of business because the structures themselves develop personality over time. Harry sighs. Are you ever going to let that go? Letting go isn't really an area of strength for me, Draco says, looking away. Harry follows his gaze down to the creek, watches the way the water curves and winds. It wasn't for Isidore Dibbler either. That was his name, the man who bought the land. When the statute of secrecy was passed, he sealed this place up. Then he died. He didn't have any kids or anyone to inherit, and he spent all the money he had buying the land in the first place, so as far as I can tell, it just sat here for centuries hidden away. One of those things that just sort of fell through the cracks. That's, Harry says, and before he can choose between insane, incredible, or some combination of the two, he wonders, wait, so how'd you find it? Oh, years ago, I came across his journal in a collection of old books I bought at an auction. Draco says, waving a hand. I do that sometimes. You can learn very interesting things that way. The balmy old coot went on and on for 600 pages about how he'd been denied his rightful fate as the owner of New Diagon. Not much of a creative thinker, Dibbler. But about halfway through there was a map which marked the place I apparated us to. Underneath it said, go to this spot and speak unto it with your body as the fish to the ocean. Only then you shall walk the path. So, well, Draco shrugs, looking a little embarrassed. I spent 2 days standing out there trying to speak with my body as the fish to the ocean, in fact. What? Says Harry, already laughing. Just kind of wiggling around. More or less, Draco admits. The muggles thought I was a busker. They threw coins at me. It wasn't one of my more dignified moments. Harry laughs some more, delighted just at the thought of it, but the sound dies in his throat as he looks around again. The moon is high over the glen, beams of light lancing down over the trees. The water, the plants and animals that have been left to their business here for centuries, untouched by human life. It's beautiful in a rough, uncomplicated way. Simple, pure. Seems like it was worth it, he says at last. Draco turns to him and smiles, a slow, warm one that Harry doesn't see very often, can never quite interpret. Yes, he says. It was. Have you ever showed this to anyone else? Harry asks on impulse. Draco freezes and then says loudly, and as if he didn't hear Harry's question at all. Come along now, Potter. We can't linger here all day. So, no, Harry thinks, grinning a little as he follows Draco down the path to the heart of the valley. He hasn't. He found this place on his own and kept it for himself. Didn't tell his mother, or Blaise, or Pansy, or even Neville, who would probably give up a limb or two to walk a patch of magical forest that's been more or less suspended in time. It sounds like Draco, who opened a museum in his home but put heavy wards and blocking charms on the part that he lives in, will talk incessantly about any topic except the shit he really means. He likes stuff like this. Open secrets. Things that could belong to everybody, but one way or another turn out to just be his. He's brought Harry to walk this ground that no one but him has touched for hundreds of years, to see this place he has kept close to his chest, private all this time. It means something, Harry's sure. He just can't quite figure out what. He walks with Draco in companionable silence, their steps guided by a path that's been worn into the ground. By Draco, Harry realizes. It couldn't really have been anyone else. "How much time do you spend here?" "Some," Draco says with a little shrug. "More than I probably should, less than I'd probably like. It's peaceful." Harry rolls his eyes. "Because you're such a peaceful person." "Well, I would be," Draco says, shooting Harry a look of dark irritation, "if everyone around me wasn't so stupid and infuriating all the time." Harry laughs. "So it's their fault that you're a touchy little git, is it?" "He says like he's not part of the problem," Draco smirks. "You might be stupider and more infuriating than the whole rest of the world combined, actually. Some days I honestly wonder." It's pretty hard to take Draco's insult to heart anymore on their worst days. Against the backdrop of the glen, Harry can't even muster up a decent scowl. "My sincerest apologies for any trouble," he says, and even though he means it to sound sarcastic, it comes out real. Genuine, horrifyingly enough. He makes a face into the darkness. "Oh," Draco says, strangled. "Would you just come on already? Stop lollygagging and speaking, Potter, God!" He picks up his pace, drawing the flask from his pocket to take a swig, and Harry follows more sedately a few steps behind, pulling in long, deep inhalations of the cool night air. He's definitely been drinking, but he thinks he'd probably feel this way even without the fire whiskey singing through his veins. Like he's somehow both drunk and sober, balanced on the knife edge between them. It's a heady sensation in its way, different than anything Harry's experienced before. It reminds him a little of flying. Draco comes to a stop in the center of a bridge, one that Harry can tell must have been pulled up out of the ground, crafted and shaped by magic. It's just one huge slab of rock and earth, and Harry leans over the edge to get a better look at it, the faintly glowing moss and lichen crawling up the side. When he pushes a little too far over, not so far that he's in danger of falling off, but far enough that he might be shortly, he hears Draco sigh, feels him take a fistful of Harry's jacket. "Are you going to vomit?" Draco's inquiry seems more wicked than concerned. "Blaze warned me about that, you know. He said you left a spectacular mess in a bush that night he ran into you last month, and that you didn't even have the decency to banish it, just left it there for someone else to deal with. For shame," he adds, sounding pleased with himself. "Terribly irresponsible of you." Harry walks slowly back off the edge of the bridge, his back hitting against the solid weight of Draco's hand. It's steadying, and he needs steadying. Draco's comment reminded Harry of the last Gryffindor piss-up, which reminds him that they just left the Gryffindor piss-up. For all they did it go somewhere that's for all intents and purposes at several hundred years remove. It crashes back into him, Ron and Hermione's announcement, and how it's wonderful, completely amazing, except for how it means that he's going to lose them, watch him drift away, walk the rest of his life alone. "All right, Potter," Draco says, and there's nothing wicked in his tone now. It's firm, insistent. "Out with it." "Out with what?" Harry's aware that it's not a particularly skillful dodge. He just doesn't care that much. "With whatever's got you all." Draco gestures broadly at Harry and makes a face. "This way. You know, looking like perhaps you're about to crawl on the bridge and cry." "Shut up, Malfoy," Harry snaps. "I'm not." "I'm not saying you are. I'm saying that's what you look like," Draco says. "I could say you look like the myopic offspring of a Kelpie and a Grindylow, and that wouldn't mean you were one, just that you looked like it. Do you understand the concept I'm laying out for you here?" When Harry doesn't say anything, just sticks his hands in his pockets and looks down at the water, Draco huffs out an irritated breath. Do I have to ply you with additional fire whiskey? Is that really what it's come to? Harry doesn't say yes, but he doesn't say no either, and Draco proffers the flask with an annoyed little flourish. Harry takes it, amazed to find it still feels full. How have we not killed this thing yet? Oh, it's from my wet bar, Draco says. He gives Harry a wary look as Harry takes a sip, like he's afraid maybe Harry will throw him over the edge for daring not to be as miserable as he is or something. It's refilling itself from one of the bottles I keep in there. The 12-year, I believe, but don't quote me. It's good, Harry says. He hadn't really noticed it at the bar, because in a bar it had tasted more or less like every other glass of cheap basic fire whiskey he's consumed at the Boatruckle over the years. Out here, though, over the rush of the water and under the riot of bird cry, Harry can appreciate the richness and spice to the flavour, the subtle difference in the way it burns down his throat. Yes, Draco says. It is, now talk. There really doesn't seem to be any way around it, but... It's stupid, Harry says. Oh, Potter. Draco's voice is very nearly kind. So is nearly everything you say. I'd hardly expect otherwise. It makes Harry feel a bit better, weirdly enough, more capable of doing it. He takes a deep breath, hoping that Draco won't actually make him spit it all out this minute, will take the hint and give him a chance to gather himself. Draco must, because he says nothing for once in his life, and Harry turns away from him to lean forward again against the wall of the bridge. Not as far as before, just enough to balance his weight. He knows he can't look at Draco while they do this. He knows that if he does, he won't even be able to bring himself to cry. Draco must know it too, because after a moment he leans on the bridge the other way, his back against the rough stone. If you're going to make me stand around waiting, he says, you could at least pass the fire whiskey. Harry takes another long drink, and then he passes the flask to Draco without looking round. Ron and Hermione, Harry says finally. His voice is gravelly with the effort it takes to push the words out. They are having another kid. I heard, Draco says. It's non-committal and brief, two things Draco rarely is, and Harry could just kill him for not being his usual babbling fountain of verbiage here, in this moment when Harry needs it. So? Harry stares out at the water, trying to find the words. For all the time he and Draco have spent together in the last month, for all the absurd, impossible, insane conversations they've had, somehow they never quite seem to get around to talking about the real stuff. Harry doesn't mind or anything. He dodges these sorts of conversations when he can in general and usually pretty successfully, but it's strange now to realize just how much he's going to have to say to make Draco understand. To realize just how much he's managed until now to avoid telling him. They were my first friends, Harry says finally, and sounds 11 fucking years old. He wrenched away from that thought the minute he has it, a full body shudder, and tries to forget what he sounds like, tries just to talk. And they're not, I mean, anymore, that they're not my only friends. I have, he swallows, lots of people these days, only it's not the same with Ron and Hermione. I don't know how to explain it, but it's true. They were, when things were really bad, you know, just as bad as they could get. They were right there the whole time, and it's not just that, he adds, too loud, a sudden spike of fury in his chest at the thought that Draco could think he means this is about what they did during the war. God, it's I never really had anybody, and then I had them, and with them it was like it was the three of us, no matter what, forever. Like it would always just come down to that in the end. Quietly, Draco says, they're your family. Oh, they're their own family. Harry spits and grimaces, hating himself. He scrubs his palms over his face. God, that's horrible. I'm sorry. And see, this is exactly the problem. We were kids, you know, back then. We were kids. And it all seemed like it would just fit forever. And there was always a goal anyway. Some whatever, either to vanquish or even just classes, just homework. It all made sense. or it didn't. None of it did, but there were constants, and we were working together for the same stuff, and I guess I just thought that's how it would be always. I guess I thought that feeling of just knowing what ground I was standing on, I guess I thought that came from them. He throws a hand out without looking back, because he can't look at Draco, but his throat is closing up. Because if he doesn't get a little more fire whiskey into him, he thinks maybe he'll die before he gets this out. Draco puts the flask in his hand and says nothing at all, and Harry's not sure if he's grateful for that or not. He takes a swig and passes it back, stares down at the ebb and flow of the water. "Nobody told me," Harry says, his voice a low rasp, "that it would get hot like this, that we'd grow up and there'd be all this other stuff, the stupid emotional shit, the stupid adulthood shit, and I know I'm not good at it. Not any of it, Malfoy. I hate my job. I hate my apartment. I don't know how to do any of the big important things, the other people's stuff. And they know, and they can tell, and they act like it doesn't matter. But I know that it does. It matters to me. And it has to matter to them anyway. If it doesn't already, it should. They're happy, normal people with a happy, normal family, and I'm whatever the hell I am. God." He says the words pouring out of him now, almost against his will. "Do you know, at dinner last week, Hermione was showing us this chart about fucking, I don't know, Muggle infant care something, talking about how Rose was 18 months old already, and soon she'd be a toddler, and what a big deal that was. She wanted us to give her suggestions on how we could, what was it, foster a safe but not overly permissive environment. Because if we didn't, she'd never grow up to be a healthy, well-adjusted adult. And I didn't, God, I didn't say anything. I just sat there because the only thing I could think of to say was that I'd spent most of my childhood locked in a cupboard." Harry stops, breathing hard. It's more than he meant to say. It's too much. It's so much, Harry thinks he might vomit after all. Proves Sabini's dire predictions right. Honestly, that might be better than standing here, the weight of what's just been drawn out of him, sitting so heavy on his shoulders that he thinks he might collapse underneath the load. It might even feel good, just because it would be something else to focus on. Then, into the ringing silence between them, Draco says, "Well, that's not at all safe, but I'll grant you that it isn't overly permissive." Harry huffs out a little noise of surprise. It's nothing like a laugh, but it's as close as he imagines he could get it right now. After a moment, Draco says, tone very even, "I suppose there's no chance that was a metaphor." "No," Harry mutters, looking at his hands. "So the Muggles who raised you," Draco says carefully, they're incredibly crap, yes." Harry bites out and waits for the rest of it. Waits for Draco to look at him with pity, the way Hermione does whenever Harry slips and brings up his youth, or says something well-meant but awkward, trying too hard, the way Ron always seems to. They're the only two examples Harry has to go on. He's never really told anyone else, though he suspected more than once that Molly and Arthur know. Draco says, "Quite," and then after a beat, "So is that all of it?" Harry chanced to look at him, a full-body involuntary action. He couldn't let himself believe it without seeing it, but there's Draco, leaning back against the bridge, elbows bent to prop himself up against the stone, looking for all the world as though they are having a conversation about Quidditch or the weather, except for the very slightest hint of anxiety in the set of his mouth. He looks Harry right in the eye, slowly raises an eyebrow, and Harry is so hideously, pathetically grateful that he has to look away, that he can't bear the relief of it for a single second longer. "All of what, Malfoy?" he says. "Oh, you know," Draco says. Turns now, so he's leaning on the bridge in the same direction as Harry, but he doesn't make Harry look at him. "The big wad of emotional compost you've had lodged in your chest all night. That's one thing I've figured out about this stupid adulthood shit, as you so eloquently put it. At some point, gosh though it is, you do have to talk about things, or they just end up rotting inside of you. I don't really think of you as someone who does a lot of emotional sharing, says Harry, who once saw Draco actually stand up and walk out of a restaurant rather than answer Harry's perfectly innocuous question about why it mattered which fork he used. Yes, well, mostly I come out here and talk to myself, Draco says, tone wry. You know, sort of, we'll do this where no one can hear you scream kind of thing. It's all very healthy. Harry laughs. He can't help himself. Draco knocks their shoulders together with a little noise of what Harry is almost certain is mock outrage. Don't laugh. It's better than your strategy. How long has that been building up exactly? Oh, I don't know, Harry admits, then a little more honestly. Probably a while. Probably a while, Draco repeats, mocking and sighs. Drops the tone. I ask again, Potter. Is that all of it? Now's the time, if it's not. No, Harry says, itchy all over at the very thought of saying anything further. I think I'm done. He's surprised to find that Draco might be right. He does feel better for having talked about it. A little. He also feels unbearably exposed, and a bit like he wants to throw himself off the bridge and let the cool rush of the water carry him away, but better. A little. Of course, then he actually thinks about what he said and immediately feels much worse. God, Malfoy, I just realized. I'm sure you think Jesus, I'm really happy for than I am. I shouldn't have said all that stuff. For God's sake, Potter, do shut up. Malfoy draws. I certainly don't care that you're not pure as the driven snow inside your own head all the time. In fact, I already knew you weren't, and I, for one, am glad of it. I'm sure some people think it's thrilling, but I find the Sanct Potter facade very tiresome. It's not a facade, Harry says, even though he thinks he knows what Malfoy means, and he finds it tiresome too sometimes, always trying to keep things on an even keel. Yes, Draco says, his tone thoughtful. In fact, in your heart of hearts, you're a very naturally pleasant person, placid even. I think I describe you most often as difficult to rouse. He only lasts a second before he starts to snicker, and Harry, to his own surprise, snickers too, shaking his head. It's so strange how Draco can see things about him that Harry works so hard to play down, tuck away. Stranger still, how he doesn't seem to mind. Some days Harry thinks Draco might even like him better for all the way he's not the man he probably should be, as though Harry's unkindness and rages and shortcomings make him a more interesting person. And it's more important than being good or just right, but that's impossible. Then again, they are standing here in a glen that's been hidden away since 1690, where Draco apparently comes to yell about his feelings, so maybe it's not. I grew up in a museum, Draco offers after a while. Harry slants a look at him, knowing full well where Draco grew up, and Draco rolls his eyes. That was a metaphor, Potter. I meant surrounded by beautiful things that I wasn't allowed to touch or even think about touching. If they could have, I think my parents would have put me under glass too. It would have been so much easier for them, so much quieter and less embarrassing and closer to what they wanted in a son. He summons a few pebbles off the ground and starts skipping them across the water, lip curling a little. It doesn't compare to being locked in a cupboard like a spare broom, of course, but it fucked me up a little anyway. There are even times I've thought it served them right, my mom and my dad, to watch a Dark Lord all but burn the place to the ground. He stops and sounds a little surprised when he says, You know, I think I've had a bit more to drink than I thought. Harry holds out a hand for the flask automatically, but Draco pours pebbles into it instead. It's better. Harry starts skipping them, trying to beat Draco's distance absently, still listening to him talk. Sometimes, Draco says, I think I started my own museum just because I wanted, I don't know, a do-over or something. Like it was an attempt to soothe some sad, pathetic part of me that's still 6 years old and terrified to breathe on anything too hard, having not figured out yet that the only way to avoid that was not really to breathe at all. Sometimes I think that's all it's about. My life, the choices I've made. Sometimes I think that's all it's about. My life, the choices I've made. He sighs, scowls. But I try not to, Potter. Do you want to know why? Harry's not sure he does, but he asks anyways. Why? Because that would make it about them, Draco says. My whole adult life, my passions, the things I've invested my time and energy in, that would make it about them, would mean it was all for them, and I don't want that, even if that is how it started out. On whatever level, it's not that now, it's for me. He nudges Harry's shoulder with his own, just a shade too hard for it to be entirely a friendly gesture. Maybe you are fucked up, you know. I think most people are, one way or another. Most worthwhile people, anyway. But if you think that means you can't figure a way out of things that make you unhappy, or that your oldest friends are going to suddenly drop you just because they're having a kid, their second kid, Potter, aren't you having this breakdown a little late? Well, then, honestly, you're even more of an imbecile than I've always thought. Draco throws all the pebbles left in his hand into the creek. They splash and plop into the water below them. All anyone can really do, he says, is try to carve out space for themselves in this world, and hold on to the people they love for as long as they've got them. That's it. I've spent the better part of my life wading through the past, and I can tell you with some certainty, that's pretty much all that we've got. You're not disqualified just because you're not a particularly well-adjusted person. He nudges Harry again, and when Harry turns his head to look at him, Draco offers him a crooked smile. Anyway, who wants to be one of those? They stay in the glen for, Harry doesn't know how long. Hours probably, just walking around, drinking, not talking about anything much. Draco shows him a cave where the stalagmites sing. Do not ask the stalactites in the cave down the way to do this, Draco warns him. They can't, and they're very sore about it. They will fall on you with great vengeance. And a little thatched hut, where Draco suspects Isidore Dibbler spent his final days. Harry, who's had an Aurus instinct drilled deep into his bones, whether he likes it or not, looks around and says, Hey, did anyone ever find his body? Oh, you are a ruinous, terrible person, Draco says after a long moment. Let's get out of here. I can't believe you just said that. I hate you. And takes him to offer some fire whiskey to a massive, gnarled fairy tree instead. They keep drinking, passing the flask back and forth between them until they're cackling over every little stupid thing the other one says, filling the valley with sound. Draco does an impression of Ron's drunken orating speech that's so dead on that Harry nearly wets himself, and Draco actually cries with laughter when Harry tells him, a little breathlessly and not sure how they got onto the topic, about blowing up his Aunt March when he was 13 years old. The little dog, Draco says, wiping his eyes. Potter, truly, you are a marvel. And Harry takes a page from Draco's book, keeps the tiny pocket of warmth that blossoms in his chest at this comment just for himself. Eventually, they stumble their way back to the portal. It closes behind them automatically, and Muggle London looks strange, bleak, after so long in the safe haven of the glen. Harry feels his spirit dim a little to think of going back to his apartment, where it's cold and it's dark and the pipes creak and the air never smells clean. Still, it's a better prospect than it was earlier in the evening, a better prospect than maybe it's ever been before. "You can come back to mine," Harry decides, directing the words at the Draco he thinks is the real Draco, and not the two standing on either side of him, who Harry suspects are impostors born of drink. "For the flu, since we are not fit for the other one apparating and such, you know." "I will not go," Draco declares loudly, right in Harry's face, "to that hole, and nor should you. Holes are terrible. No one will go to the hole tonight, Potter. Not for 1 minute, not even for flu. I would rather—" He sets off laughing again, has to gasp the next words through his mirth. "Take the night bus like a teen on the run from justice for crimes of engorgement." At this point, he loses control of speech entirely, just covers his face with his hands and howls. He stumbles with it, apparently too overcome to hold on to his mastery of balance. Harry reaches out a hand to steady him automatically, and somehow ends up with Draco leaning against him for support, his whole body shaking with laughter against Harry's. It's nice, warm. Harry doesn't mind it. They do in fact end up taking the night bus back to Grimmauld Place, but Harry doubts he'll remember a lot about it. When they get home, to Draco's home, Harry reminds himself, to the home that could have been Harry's but never really was, and has long since belonged to Draco. Draco climbs the stairs and Harry follows. He doesn't realize they've turned onto one of the watered staircases until Draco says, "This is where the spells are. Creature, turn off the spells."
"The wards do not affect guests who are with Master Draco,"
Creature says, appearing with a crack,
"as Master Draco usually knows very well."
He looks and sounds like he's a bit put out by their show of debauchery. Harry doesn't really blame him, but just can't bring himself to care all that much right now. Creature's mad at him, anyway, because Harry keeps cooking and it's like against the old codes or whatever. The house is sad about it. Something. He'll figure it out when he's sober. "Hey," Harry says, a thought popping into his head and eclipsing all other in its glory. He pokes Draco, who's a few steps above him, right in the middle of his back. "Can we go back sometime with brooms and fly?" "We can do whatever you like," Draco says in a briefly dignified moment at the top of the stairs. "We are grown men in the prime of our lives." Then he ruins it, somewhat by adding, "I must bathroom, then sleeping. Take whatever bed you like." "I must bathroom?" Harry yells down the hallway after him. "Really? Is that how you say it in posh?" "A piss off, Potter, you enormous twat!" Draco calls back, but he's laughing when he throws a rude gesture over his shoulder. Harry makes his beeline for the first bed he sees, a big one with light grey covers on that's whatever, in a room that wasn't serious, and that's about all he's got. He falls on top of it, fully clothed and with both of his shoes on, and blissfully closes his eyes. "Oh my God," Draco says, what could be a moment or an hour later. "Potter, not this bed. I didn't mean this bed." "You said I could have any bed," Harry says, not opening his eyes. "That I like this bed." "I like that bed too," Draco says, "because it is my bed. Now get out." Harry cracks one eye open. Draco is wearing pajamas now. They look soft. Also, he's glaring at Harry, which he probably thinks is very menacing, except that what he probably doesn't know is that his hair is all sticky-uppy. Hilarious. Harry's just drunk and amused and comfortable and 12 years old inside enough to let himself say, "I don't see your name on it." "Oh, for the love of God," Draco starts, "and I'm the one who's in it." Harry has found that sometimes when one is talking to Draco Malfoy, one has to think like Draco Malfoy and just talk whenever one feels like it, regardless of whether or not it's rudely interrupting. "So, you know, Squatter's rights, Malfoy." Draco makes a muted little noise of outrage and then, mutinously, flops down next to Harry on top of the covers. "Now I'm in it, and it's my bed. That beats your squatter's rights 2-1. Get the hands, thief." "I was here first," Harry points out, decidingly to let "get the hands, thief" go because he's tired, and if he remembers it, it'll be a nice gift for poor tragic hangover Harry in the morning. "It's my bed," Draco says for the third time in as many minutes. He's acting all hysterical about it, but the way where he's kidding, so it's fine. If he were really mad, he'd pretend it like he wasn't. "It's my house." "That," Harry says, smirking at Draco, "was mine first, too." Draco groans. Harry grins and closes his eyes. It's his bed, dead to rights. Time goes a little fuzzy for a second, but then, "Get out," Draco says, kicking himself half-heartedly. He sounds sleepy. Soon his kicks will stop. "You get out," Harry tells him, muffled against the pillow. God, it's so soft. "That to rights." "Not even sense," Draco murmurs. "On your own, would I say?" "No, you," Harry argues and passes out. Harry wakes up slow. He hurts, but he's comfortable. His own bed's not this comfortable. Maybe Ron and Hermione's guest room? No, and not the burrow either. There's no mysterious lumps in the mattress, no distant sounds of yelling. He should probably open his eyes and make sure he hasn't been taken prisoner or something, but he sorts of doubts it. All of his limbs feel like they're reporting for duty, and he doesn't think Kidnappers would put him in a bed this soft, with sheets that smell fresh and clean, a pillow like a cloud under his aching head. God, his head! What happened last night? He's never awoken in this sort of pain in an unfamiliar bed before. Even when he's gone out and pulled, he's always taken partners back to his own place rather than submit to the unknowns of a stranger's living environment. He rubs his cheek against the pillow and makes a soft sound. Maybe his policy of not sleeping in strange beds has in fact been incredibly stupid all this time. This one, wherever it is definitely an upgrade. "Oof," says someone to his left. Now sure that he is not alone, Harry really has no choice but to open his eyes. He cracks them the absolute smallest amount possible, not even enough to be able to properly see, but it's an agony anyway. The light of the room all but searing his retinas. He pushes through it with only one groan of anguish because he's a man and will not be brought low by daylight, and opens them the rest of the way. Draco is laying on the pillow next to his. Harry guards him for a moment. His face is screwed up in grimace, clearly not wholly asleep but not wholly awake either. Harry can relate. They're not touching, but they are so close that they almost might as well be. Draco sprawled out across most of the bed, loose and near sleep the way he isn't in life, where he's all carefully controlled motion. Harry's the opposite, has slept as long as he can remember, curled into a tight, question mark sort of shape, arms wrapped around the bottom half of his pillow, head buried in the top. Draco's hair is in his eyes. Harry has the absurd half-formed thought that he should touch it or something before he wakes up enough to recognize that as nonsense. What did they do last night? Harry's fully clothed, even his shoes are on, and he considers panicking and throwing himself out of the bed for a second, but he doesn't. It would be stupid. Draco's fully dressed too, albeit in pyjamas, and anyway, Harry's not insane enough to think that they might have, whatever, gotten up to anything untoward. It would be crazy, like he told Ron and Hermione that one time. Ron and Hermione. Harry groans again, bits and pieces of the night coming back to him. Draco showed up at the pub. Night, and then Harry was all selfish and stupid about, God, Ron and Hermione having another baby, and Draco took him to a secret forest about it. Maybe that part was a dream, Harry thinks. It doesn't feel like a dream, though. Fuck, his head hurts. Stop, Draco mumbles, eyes still closed. With the sounds. Death to science. Be silent. Oh, make me, Harry mutters back. Draco's eyes snap open. For a second, they just look at each other, and Harry thinks Draco's probably having the same train of thought he did a minute ago. He wonders, in too much pain to care about it all that much, if Draco's going to panic and throw himself out of the bed, but he doesn't. He just kind of draws in a big breath and then sighs it out again, wincing on the exhalation. Hi, Draco says at last. Hey, says Harry. Are we dead? Draco asks. It sounds like a genuine question. Or do I just wish I was dead? If this is death, I hate it, and I won't stay. I want my money back. We're not dead, says Harry, though he does have to take a moment to consider it. And that's not really how death works, anyway. It's too early for your boy who lived rubbish, Draco says grouchily. His eyes fall closed again, though this doesn't seem to deter him from talking. Just be a fucking person for 17 seconds and talk about, I don't know, how your mouth feels like it's been coated in sewage or something. Not sewage, Harry says, considering it. More like, I don't know, violent sadness. I hate you, Draco says, mostly into his pillow. I can't believe I'm going to die here like this, and the last thing anyone's ever going to have said to me is that their mouth tastes of bile and sadness. You said, oh, I know what I said, shut up, you terrible breath-hole, Draco snaps. Without opening his eyes, he makes a valiant attempt to sit up, gets about halfway there, lets out a little heart cry, and collapses back down onto the bed. This is it, the end times, the final note in a tragically short symphony. Please write my mother and tell her I died with dignity, will you? Lie as boldly as possible. Share nothing of the true events, and say I was taken down in a heroic, well, make up something heroic anyway. You're being very dramatic, Harry tells him, and Draco swats at him blindly, his fingers brushing Harry's sleeve, but not landing any more serious blows. Harry grins, even through the hangover. Missed me, Malfoy. Bite me, Potter, Draco yawns hugely. Harry thinks he's the one to talk about terrible breath. God, I need Patience, Creature! Creature appears with a crack. Harry and Draco let out simultaneously half-shouted groans of agony at the sound. "Why?" says Harry, burying his face into the pillow as deep as it will go.
"Master Draco summoned?"
Creature sounds too chipper by half, even through the pillow. Probably he thinks this is what they deserve for stumbling in here at whatever o'clock in the morning, drunk as skunks. He might not be wrong, but Harry doesn't have to like it. "Hangover potion," Draco says, the way a man might gasp for water after days stranded in a desert. Harry lifts his head a bit and sees that he looks like it too. A little. "I urge you, I implore you, I beg, on bended knee." "You're laying down, Malfoy," says Harry, just to be obnoxious. "I will actually kill you," Draco says, "in cold blood, right here. You watch, I'll do it." "I'll believe it when I see it," Harry says, and then, when Draco glares at him and reaches threateningly towards a spare pillow, "Good, fine, I'm shaking in my boot. Are you happy?" "Oh my God, you are actually wearing boots," Draco says, yelps really. Harry winces against the soft fabric of the pillowcase. "In my bed? Did you take some kind of intensive course on being the worst house guest in all of space and time? No, wait, don't answer that. We have more important matters to attend to. Creature," he continues in ingratiating tones, "if you could please, I beg you, get the hangover potion and don't." He vanishes with a crack right as Draco says, "Disapparate! Oh my God, please just let me die." "Me first," Harry says. "Rude," says Draco, and closes his eyes again, only to jump violently and moan when Creature reappears. It hurts like hell for Harry too, but, well, it's pretty funny. "Stop laughing at the misfortune of others, Potter," Draco says, sitting up to grab a vial off the tray in Creature's hands and downing it in one go. He collapses back against the pillow with a sigh. "Oh, thank Merlin. I really thought that was it for me." He fixes Harry with a dark look. "Go on, then. Your turn." "It's cheating," Harry protests. It is feeble protest, but he feels it necessary to make all the same. "If you're going to drink, you should suffer the consequences of drinking." "That's the absolutely most idiotic thing I've ever heard in my life." But Draco says this to Harry at least 3 times a week. It's kind of lost its punch. "Your little mattering streak is very upsetting, and if you don't take the bloody potion, I will be forced to transfigure this pillow into a tiny violin to play for you about it." He smiles sweetly and then adds, "Well, I say play. I've never actually studied the violin, so the correct word might be torture." "You're a bad person," Harry mutters. "I hope yours stops working." But he sits up and takes the stupid potion anyway. It leaves his mouth tasting fresh and clean, and helps a lot, actually, which is annoying. "There," Draco says, sounding satisfied, as he flips back the covers and burrows into his bed. "Doesn't that feel much better than your moralistic nonsense? Now, go make me breakfast." Harry is so occupied with trying to think of a way to avoid admitting to the first half of that statement that it takes him a moment to process the second. When he does, he rolls his eyes. "Seriously, Malfoy?" "That's the going rate of exchange for my hangover potion," Draco says. Only one of his eyes is visible, but that one is wicked. "Don't look at me. If you didn't want to make me breakfast, you shouldn't have accepted a potion in the first place." "Which time?" Harry says, more to entertain himself than for any other reason, since either way, it's not like Draco gave him much of a choice. "Oh, either?" Draco says. "Both. Who cares? Take your pick." He yawns, then, huge and cracking, eyes falling shut and staying that way, one arm sprawling out to stretch halfway into the space Harry vacated when he sat up. Harry looks down at his wild hair, the faint circles under his eyes, and finds himself suffused, suddenly, with a rush of affection for this man, however odd or bossy or exhausting. He's remembering more of last night now, that his body's not actively fighting him, and he's not sure anyone's ever done anything quite like that for him before. He can't even entirely wrap his mind around it. The shape of the memory, strange and incongruous, its smooth, polished edges not finding anywhere to fit with the rest of Harry's largely jagged mental landscape. He wouldn't trade it, though, not for anything. Breakfast probably the least he can do. "Don't get used to this," Harry warns, standing up. I don't want you to go getting any insane ideas about bossing me around being a good or effective strategy for making me do stuff. Draco makes a little scoffing noise into his pillow. Oh, please, like I don't know how to get you to do things. I want sausages. You're getting bacon, Harry says, automatic. See? Draco says and yawns again. It's so easy. It's honestly quite sad. I don't know why I spend time with you, Harry says. I really don't. But he picks his coat up off the floor, walks downstairs, and opens the front door to head out for supplies. At least he starts to. Creature appears with a crack between him and the door before Harry can open it more than an inch, grabs him by the ends of his shirt and says,
No, Harry Potter will not do this again.
Harry sighs.
Look, Creature. Harry Potter will not. Look, Creature, Creature
says.
Creature will. Look, Harry Potter, Harry Potter. If Harry Potter likes to cook, then Harry Potter likes to cook. Creature understands. What Creature does not understand,
he continues, his tone going dark and foreboding,
is why Harry Potter keeps insisting on leaving. Is why Harry Potter keeps bringing into the noble and most ancient house of black foods that smell awful and are locked in packages, which Harry Potter must cut with a knife.
Says Harry, staring. You mean groceries?
Creature does not care what they are called.
Creature nearly wails this, pulling hard on Harry's shirt.
Why is Harry Potter not using the storeroom? Creature worked hard for many years on that storeroom. The house worked hard for many years on that storeroom. Harry Potter does not otherwise seem like a cruel person.
Privately, Harry thinks that maybe so many years with Draco has made Creature a more dramatic elf. He's not planning on mentioning it to anyone, though. Harry says. He blinks at Creature, who looks like he might be about to cry and caves. Do you know, Creature, I've actually never seen the storeroom. Creature stares at him for a moment, and then realization lights up his face.
Oh, of course, because Harry Potter was a terrible master and never bothered to learn the secrets of the house.
Creature sighs a little mistily and pats Harry on the leg.
Creature likes Harry Potter so much better now that Harry Potter is an adult.
Says Harry. Thanks, Creature. Creature nods cheerfully and then starts walking one corner of Harry's shirt still in his hand. Helplessly, Harry lets himself be towed, thinking that Creature really has become rather a lot like Draco and finding that he is vaguely amused by it. They go down to the kitchen and then through the kitchen to the mudroom, and then Creature reaches out and presses a finger against the grout between two tiles on the far wall. Harry stands eyes widening in shock and watches the whole wall fall back and away into an enormous set of wooden stairs, clearly old but well-maintained, solid. Creature lets go of Harry's shirt and hops up and down a bit in excitement before he adopts a very solemn manner and gestures Harry in.
The storeroom, Harry Potter.
Harry takes the first few steps down the stairs hesitantly. Then, when he sees what's actually below him, he takes them two at a time. The cellar, because that's what it is enormous, spanning what has to be the underside of the entire first floor. Massive load-bearing columns are spaced out evenly across the expanse, and between them are seemingly endless shelves, each one of them covered with food. Harry can see lettuce and legumes, pomegranate and potatoes, a tank full of lobsters, a whole side of beef. In one corner, a sheaf of wheat seems to be milling itself into flour and then reassembling into stalks again, an endless, impossible cycle. A little blindly, just wanting to prove to himself that he's not having some kind of hallucination or something, Harry reaches out and picks up an apple from the nearest bushel. It resists, almost, for a moment, like his hand is reaching a little farther than just the distance Harry can see in order to pick it up. But then it comes away easily, and, as Harry watches in amazement, is immediately replaced by an identical apple. He takes a bite. It tastes like the sun rising. How? Harry demands of Creature, staggered to think that this was here under his feet when he was 17 and mentally shattered and eating crappy takeaway for dinner every night because he couldn't keep his thoughts in order long enough to so much as make a shopping list. How can this even exist? How did it do? He gestures with his bitten apple to where its identical cousin is now perched. "That!" Creature beams.
"The storeroom has been here since the house was built, Harry Potter. The noble and most anxious House of Black has made many shrewd trades and deals over the centuries, and some of them were food, and some of them were for farming rights. The storeroom is remembering that."
"So what?" Harry says slowly, trying to pass Creature's always cryptic house talk. "Every time the Blacks got food, like ever, since the house been built, they just put it in here. How does it not all go bad?"
"This storeroom has very complicated stasis charms, Harry Potter,"
Creature says. Lowering his voice conspiratorially, he adds,
"There are even stories of mistresses and masters sleeping in it to keep themselves fresh."
He titters a shrill, shrieking sort of giggle before he calms himself and nods at the apple in Harry's hand.
"And some of it is replenishing constantly because of trade agreements that have been honored for hundreds of years. That apple Harry Potter is eating from the orchards at Malfoy Manor. Master Draco is making sure himself."
Harry stares down at the apple. He takes another bite. It's even better than the first one was. A little wryly, thinking of all the times he has left for Tesco's run, and Draco, the bastard, has just let him go, he says, "So, Master Draco is knowing about the storeroom, huh?"
"Master Draco is knowing about everything,"
Creature says, with, Harry notes in amusement, a slightly grim effect.
"Master Draco is knowing about things even Mistress Black was not knowing about. Things the house did not think a master would ever know again."
"He's weird like that," Harry agrees. "Probably went absolutely mental and read every book in the whole place for the notes and Morgans and shit. Maybe dug up the journal of all the old owners. I wouldn't put it past him." Creature makes a little squeaking noise the way he does when they're treading too close to the dangerous territory of actually insulting Draco, and vanishes with his customary crack. A basket appears in the spot where he stood a second later, and Harry picks it up, tucks it over his arm. He eats his apple, and when he puts the core into the basket to throw away upstairs, it simply vanishes. The same happens with the hull of perfectly ripe strawberry, the top of sweet, crisp carrot. There's a whole shelf covered just in loaves of bread. Harry cracks one open and inhales, bowled over because for all he knows it's from the 1850s, but it smells fresh from the oven. When he puts that in the basket, it seems to know he doesn't want it vanished, and it holds it for him, even though he's already taken a bite. Harry doesn't come upstairs for a long time. When he does, he's not really thinking about cooking Draco breakfast so much as he's just thinking about cooking. All the random passing ideas he'd had as he walked around that he gathered up ingredients for because they were there, because he felt like it. The kitchen, which has always just seemed to be a kitchen to Harry before, if a much better and brighter one than his own, seems to work with him, now that he's not working with outside food. His chopping spells all cut themselves off at the exact right amount for whatever dish he's working on, even when he forgets to check on them. The spices grind themselves by magic over the bowls and pots. The stove turns down the heat the moment he wants it to, without his even reaching for the knobs. Harry finds himself humming, as he works, some old Muggle song he remembers from the radio as a kid, and even though Grimmauld Place couldn't possibly know it, it almost seems to be humming along, pans and spoons clanking and clattering to the beat. Harry makes apple popovers and spinach quiche and bacon because Draco said he wanted sausage. He makes crabs and citrus balls. A potato hash studded through with wild mushrooms, soft-boiled eggs, and avocado toast. He makes a fruit salad, which seemed such a simple thing once upon a time, but is suddenly an endlessly changeable landscape now that Harry has every kind of fruit and veg there is, held forever at peak ripeness at his fingertips.
"Oh, I want to dance with somebody."
Harry's singing to himself tunelessly over a pot of raspberry sauce for the lemon cake, when he hears Malfoy clear his throat. Abruptly, the fog lifts, and Harry looks around to realize that he has made really quite a lot of food, much more food than he and Draco could possibly consume. He says, Are you throwing a party?" Draco looks much too amused for anyone's good, least of all Harry's. "Or raising an army, perhaps?" Harry flushes. I think I got a bit carried away. Oh, do you think so? Says Draco, raising both his eyebrows in entertained incredulity. I said make me breakfast, Potter, not make me breakfast for 12. You never told me about the storeroom, Harry exclaims. His cheeks are burning, but the hell if he's going to let Draco win without a fight, a storeroom hiding little git. And then Creature showed me, and I mean... He gives Draco a helpless look, spreading his hands, and drips some raspberry sauce on the floor. Draco's face does something strange for a second. He's staring at Harry with such an odd intensity that Harry almost thinks maybe he's going to do something, walk across the kitchen and just, well, Harry doesn't know what. It doesn't matter anyway, because Draco swallows, averts his eyes. Yes, he says quietly. I see how a person could get carried away. Harry makes a face at him, because he's weird and he's mad, and half the time Harry thinks he talks in riddles for the sole purpose of driving Harry crazy. Draco doesn't seem to notice, gaze fixed out on the window. And Harry shrugs, finishes off the last few things on the stove, and then stares down at the whole mess of it, wondering at the best method for serving it all up. Says Harry a little despairingly. Do you want to just go at it? Draco turns to look at him so quickly that Harry startles a little. He stares at Harry, blinking fast for a moment, and then looks at the food and releases this little sound, half sigh, half... Harry doesn't know what. Oh, Draco says, sounding a little breathless for some reason. Well, that's a horrific and Philistine idea, actually, but sure, why not? He picks up a fork out of the drawer, walks over to the dish of potato hash, holds the fork poised over it for a moment, then gives Harry an apprehensive look. You know what? I take it back. This just feels wrong. Harry rolls his eyes, but Draco won't be moved. In the end, and at his direction, Harry ends up cutting or spooning or heaping portions of everything onto a giant platter that he leaves in the middle of the kitchen island. Which was stupid, he says to Draco as they eat, because all we did is dirty an extra dish, and we are still standing up and being Philistines or whatever. Yes, well, Draco says, I like that part of the idea. It seemed avant-garde and unusual. Someday, many years from now, my grandchildren will say to me, Oh, Grandpa, what's the strangest experience you've ever had? And I'll say, Well, children, once I stood in my kitchen with Harry Potter, ate 4 times my body weight in breakfast food, and ended up in St. Mungo's, which just goes to show the importance of proper decorum at mealtime. And they will look up at me with rapt attention and say, Oh, Grandpa, what an exotic and fascinating story. You do bring life to even the most uninteresting topics. And I will thank them and carry on with my business. You never actually met a kid in your life, have you? Harry asks, thinking of Teddy, who would sooner die than spit any one of those sentences out of his mouth. Draco scowls at him. I seem to recall that I was entertaining several of them when we met a month ago. He stops, looking briefly horrified, before suddenly he says, Not met, obviously, I just meant, I know what you meant, Harry says, because he does. It feels that way a little for him too, like Draco's a totally different person than the child he knew in school, even though in some ways he's so like that proud, unyielding boy that's as though no time has passed at all. You want kids, then? Oh my God, Potter, Draco says appalled. It's not even 11 in the morning. You're a horrifically ill-mannered person. I refuse to answer that question. Who just asks someone that question? Harry shrugs and eats some of his lemon cake with raspberry sauce. It's not bad. Oh, I don't know. I didn't know it was a thing or whatever. I was just saying because you said, that whole rant about. He waves his fork in there expensively. Your weird manner-obsessed future grandchildren. Oh, honestly, Draco says, exacerbated, but maybe a little too amused. I was doing a bit. I didn't actually intend us to have some sort of... He pauses, shudders hard enough that Harry's almost certain it's for dramatic effect. Heart to heart about it or anything. Oh, Harry says, and remembers something else from last night. Well, do you swear no one can hear you scream sort of thing? Draco gives him a crooked little smile, inclines his head very slightly, and says nothing, and Harry has to pretend to be intensely focused on the crumb of his lemon cake, so that Draco won't see the stupid look on his face. Harry doesn't quite know what's happening suddenly in this familiar room, in this familiar house, with this all too familiar person. Something feels wrong with him this morning. Maybe it's something wrong with Draco, or with them both? Or maybe wrong is the wrong word for it entirely. Maybe there's a better way to describe the sensation that skitters along the edges of Harry's awareness, just very slightly unsettling him. It's as though everything's the same, but totally different, or just more intense or something. Then, in a total departure from everything Harry has ever understood to be true about him, Draco says thoughtfully, "You know, Potter, you're really quite good at this cooking lark." Harry thinks for a horrible moment that it's some kind of, pity thing maybe, or something. Like Harry got all weird and fucked up with Draco last night, told him all that stuff he never tells anybody, and now Draco doesn't feel like he can be mean anymore. God, Harry thinks he might lose his mind if that's happened, and how absurd, how nonsensical that he so hates to think about losing. What, about 45 insults an hour and several unflattering nicknames? Who wants that from someone? Why? Luckily, when he looks up, Draco is staring at his fork, as though it has horribly betrayed him, so Harry doesn't have to worry about it. "That's really took a lot out of you saying that," Harry says relaxing, "didn't it? Oh, I can tell." "I felt a whole year of my life slip through my fingers," Draco agrees, and Harry throws a potato at him, and thinks that he's just being crazy and everything is perfectly normal. That night he goes to dinner at the Burrow. Molly and Arthur are thrilled about the baby and furious that everyone else found out before they did. "It was Gryffindor pop night, Mum," Ron protested in desperation. "We couldn't move it. It's not my fault you wouldn't skip Great Aunt Agatha's death day party." And when Harry looks for the knot of bitterness and fear in his chest, he finds it isn't there. Or, well, a bit of it still is. Maybe Draco's thing about emotional compost was more appropriate. Just, maybe it won't be so terrible. He holds Rose on his lap, and Ron and Hermione talk to each other, of course, but they talk to him too, and so does everyone else. It's not like the Gryffindor piss-up, the rest of Harry's life. He doesn't feel abandoned or alone most of the time. Lonely, sure, but not in the same way. Not like he's stuck at a table with no one to talk to. He smiles a little, that strange feeling from this morning stealing over him again, foxing the edges of his awareness. He had someone to talk to last night, this morning. So what if Ron and Hermione's lives are changing, filling up? Harry's life is changing too. Harry's life is fuller, just now, than he thinks it's maybe ever been before. He thanks Molly for a lovely meal. He goes home. He falls asleep grinning, laughing to himself about Draco saying, "Get thee hence, thief," which his brain has held back from him all day, saved as a happy little gift on which to close his eyes. He wakes up to the crack of a house elf appearing in his bedroom. To be continued. Thank you for listening to this chapter of What We Pretend We Can't See by Gyzym, read by LMX Mabella. If you would like to stay up to date on upcoming chapters and stories, you can follow me on YouTube, Spotify, and AO3.